This one's the heated one because it's talking about conflict resolution. It's called following through, follow through. You know, when we have an issue, when we have a problem, if we just stop short, we're not going to heal the problem. We have to follow through. We have to follow through. If we're going to speak the truth in love, we talk about that. If we're going to speak with knowledge and give our knowledge and give our thoughts, our opinions in the soft approach and the right way of doing it, then what we need to do is we need to follow through with the conflict. If there's a conflict, if we just continue to sweep it under the rug, so to speak, or keep pushing it to the side, eventually that conflict's going to come up again. Here's what I know. I know that if we don't resolve a conflict that can be resolved, eventually the conflict will arise again in some form, in some way. Now, they tell us that there's about, in fact, I think it's Dr. John Gottman that will attest to this and writes about this, that only about 30% of conflicts can be resolved. And that doesn't sound like very good news. That most conflicts are not resolvable, but it's where you find common ground. That most things are not really resolvable, that it's not concrete and resolvable, but that we find common ground. You know, I said earlier we was talking about expectations and expectations that are not reasonable, being one that maybe, I use the example like your sister, has to be nice to me. Well, that's kind of an unreasonable expectation because my wife has no control over that, or your spouse has no control over that. But one thing that we can do is we can find some common ground. And when we find that common ground, that means that maybe it's a conflict I have, but the common ground may be this, that I believe you need to talk to your sister and set some boundaries where that person only has a certain amount of influence in our system. This is our system. This is our family system. Your parents don't belong in this system. Your parents don't belong in this system. This is you and me and the kids. This is our system, and there's boundaries. So we may have to find some common ground on some things. One of the conflicts that I see in so many families is cell phones. Cell phones are a huge problem in a lot of couples. They can't even go on a date night unless their face is in front of a cell phone. They're texting, emailing. They're maybe not emailing anymore. I think email is about a thing of the past, but they're texting. They're on Facebook. They're on the internet. And so when they're on a date night, supposed to be spending quality time together, somebody's face is in a phone. And I've found that almost every couple that walks into my office, they're having problems with someone or one of them being on the cell phone. So this is a solvable conflict. And when we bring that conflict up and we state our problem and state the conflict, then what we have to do is we have to follow through. We have to find a resolution. Now, Ephesians chapter 4, Paul states it this way. He said, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you." A lot connected to those scriptures about following through, getting a resolution for our conflicts. Most people don't listen in the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. You get that? Most people, they listen with the intent to, they don't listen to the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. How many times, and I may be speaking to myself here, I don't know how many times I'm hearing someone talk and the entire time they're speaking to me, I'm thinking about what my response is going to be or about what I want to say. Because isn't the thing that I want to say more important? What I've got to say is very important. So I wish they would hurry up and get done so I could tell them what I'm thinking. And we don't hear them. And so our intent needs to be on listening and instead of focusing on speaking. To resolve a conflict well, couples will need to listen well. Listening is part of communication. I say this in the church all the time about prayer is not just praying, prayer is listening as well. because it's just a communication. So communication is not just speaking, communication is listening. And probably one of my weaker points as well, along with patience, is listening. I always have something important to say. I wake up every morning thinking that what I have to say is the most important. But listening is incredibly handy when you come into communicating. When a person hears something that he does not agree with, he will put up an interruption. Interruptions come in many, many different forms. When we're talking and communicating with each other, if you're telling me something, one of the interruptions is not listening for me, because I'm not hearing what you're saying. So we put up these interruptions, and there's 3 types of interruptions. There's a lot more than this, especially when you're in a household and you're trying to talk about something. How many know that kids are an interruption? That they're running through the house screaming, the cell phone ringing, vibrating, buzzing. I've got couples coming in now, and what I've been doing lately is my phone normally sits way over. I don't even put the phone next to me when I'm visiting with couples because I want my attention on them. But one of the things that happens, it can be sitting across the room on my desk, and those things seem like they vibrate the loudest whenever you're trying to talk to someone. And every 5 seconds, it's vibrating and bouncing all over the desk. So what I've been doing is when couples come in, my wife knows where I'm at. She knows how to get a hold of me if she needs me, is I just put it on Do Not Disturb. A cell phone is an interruption. And how many of us at times think that no matter what we're doing, if that thing vibrates, I've got to turn away from you and put all my attention on that phone because somebody posted something on Facebook and I've got to see if they responded to what I had to say. Because we're so caught up in what we post, and somebody's surely going to respond to it because that was a good post. There's 3 interruptions that I want you to see, though. You can name many. One of them is this: negative body language. I've experienced that all day right here in this setting. I watch through here and I see all kinds of body language. It's fun. I love to talk about body language because body language speaks more sometimes than our words. And they've even got a percentage out there that says body language is a huge percent of communication. How you express when someone's talking to you. Do you look down at the ground? Here's something that I work on so diligently here at the church, is because when people are walking out and they're wanting to tell me something, I'm so distracted by people around me that when they're talking to me, my eyes are going over here, it's going over them. I may be looking down at the ground, someone's coming through, and I'm going everywhere instead of focusing on the person telling me something. It's important that when someone's communicating to us that we focus. Body language is huge. If we are throwing our arms up in the air, if we're making these whirling our eyes, these are things, putting our arms, crossing our arms and leaning back and doing all kinds of body language. And I'll watch body language in session. When a couple comes in, I'll watch their body language and I'll even address it at times. I'll say, why did you do that? And I'll ask them that because I can see a person, when one person says one thing, I can see the look on the spouse and I can tell you whether they agree with it or not. Because it's just automatic. So the second thing, one of them is body language. The second one, interruption, is butting in. An interruption that we have when someone's talking, and my wife could probably tell you this, I probably am the world's worst when it comes to her telling me something, trying to butt in, because remember, we've got something important to say. But you know what you're communicating to the other person is that what you have to say is more important than what they're telling you. And so we butt in. And what that does is it puts an interruption up, because if they're trying to communicate something to you, and they need you to hear them completely through, because I don't know how many times my wife has told me something or telling me something, and I butt in and finish her sentence, and that's not even what she was saying. But it puts an interruption up, and I can't hear everything that she's telling me. So sometimes I butt in, and she'll she has tried to stop, and at times she has stopped and not even finished. And I'm like, no, go ahead, I'll promise. I'll be quiet this time. Let you finish. And I find out that when she finishes, it has nothing to do with what I was thinking she was getting ready to say. So this is how we interrupt. 3 types of interruption. Number 3, thinking of what you're going to say instead of listening. So instead of listening, maybe you're not butting in yet. Maybe you haven't caused that interruption, but you're sitting there thinking about what you're going to say next. And we put an interruption up and we don't hear them completely. There's 3 methods of conflict resolution. We just kind of went through the parts of kind of getting up to communicating it and how to communicate with each other. But this comes up to the method of conflict resolution. Is the number one thing that I believe is that we need to create a time and a place for resolution. I believe there's a time and a place. There's a time and place. Times that are not good for resolution. Here's some times that I believe that are not good. You can probably come up with more, but this is what I've come up with for now. Is right before you go to bed is not a good time for resolution. And when I mean that, I don't mean placing time in there where you've got an hour or so before you go to bed. I'm talking about when the guy gets up and says, I'm going to bed, and he goes to sleep. The wife gets up and goes to bed. We talked about this in one of the other sessions where the wife gets up and says, I'm going to go to bed, and it takes her 20 minutes to get there. I'm talking about at the moment you're getting ready to go to bed, lay down and sleep. You got to get up early, and you want to fight. You want to resolve your conflict. Not a good time. You don't have the time to do it. And usually when that happens, it goes into an hour. Sometimes if it's a really bad one, it goes to 2 hours. And the next thing you know, it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. You got to get up at 4 or 5 o'clock and go to work. You're going to have a really, really bad day. And you're not going to solve anything because you're going to be tired. And remember this, when those revolutions start making their circle, and then you put tired on top of triggers, you put tired on top of emotions, you put tired on top of feelings and behaviors, it's going to be bigger and bigger as you go. You're not going to accomplish anything. The second thing is right before you go into a restaurant. Maybe some of this is by experience. Don't start a conflict resolution right before you go into a restaurant, especially if you're meeting someone. Sometimes when that happens, things won't go well with your meeting with someone because you're not going to be able to complete. Here's the thing with conflict resolution. We need to be heard and understood, both of us. And when we do that, it's going to take a little bit of time. Most conflicts going to take a little bit of time. So the third thing is times that are not good is right before church. I know this is kind of comical when you think about it because most conflicts happen on the way to church. And so I tell everybody that my wife and I take separate vehicles every Sunday morning. And that's not really the case, but the enemy wants to destroy everything that you're going to accomplish when you walk through that door on Sunday morning. So he wants you to have conflict on the way to church. Because you're thinking about, hey, I'm going to church. I'm getting ready to go worship God. I'm getting ready to be in relationship with all the community. And on the way to church, we start our conflict. Oh, by the way, we need to take care of this. Well, how much time do you have? Most of you live in the vicinity of this church right here. You travel maybe 10 to 15 minutes. You're not going to resolve anything in 10 to 15 minutes. In fact, you're going to walk out and one of you is going to be bawling because that's like a behavior that happens. One of you is going to be ticked off, red in the face. One of you is going to come on into the church while the other one sits out there and gets all their eyes all dried up so they come in so no one knows. You walk in, you barely sit by each other. When you do, you're just like, don't touch me. Don't you even get near me. I don't care. You can raise your hand, but don't touch me. You can clap your hand. You better dance somewhere else, son. You're not going to dance. So you know what I'm saying? People know that. People read you. So going in right before church. Things that are not good for resolution or times that are not good for resolution is right before you leave for work. Right before you leave for work. Makes for a miserable day. You cannot solve things right before you go to work. And then you try to solve it through text. And let me tell you this, conflict should never be solved through text. You cannot read emotions. You can't read the right word. Some of the words I put on when I text, I've heard people in the church tell me that when I make a text, it is so harsh. And I'm like, what? I don't get it. My wife was like, you let me edit those texts before you hit send. And I don't, it's not harsh at all to me. But for the other person, it's very harsh. And so she says, you let me edit all your emails and all your texts before you send them. And it's the same way with work. You get to work and you're trying to text, you're trying to fix it, it doesn't work. He said that wrong. I think he meant that different. He meant that different, and we're all just assuming everything. So that's times. And there's places that are not appropriate for resolution. Places. I mean, there's times that we don't do it, and there's places. One place that is not appropriate for resolution is in bed. Now, this is one of the things that my wife and I, we took care of years and years ago. Like I said, we've been married over 30 years, and this happened many, many moons ago when we tried to argue in bed. Well, I'm the type of person, when I lay down in bed and I get still, I have a tendency of falling asleep. It's not a good idea to fall asleep in the middle of a conflict. It's not a good idea. And I remember the day, and I can remember the house. The house no longer exists. It was right down this street. It was a rent house right while we were building our house. We were in that house. Kids were really, really little. I think Bo was barely one, maybe not even one. And we were going to have an argument that night. We laid down in that bed, and I can remember exact place, the exact time. We were laying in that bed, and she started communicating this conflict. And in the middle of that conflict, my body, when it goes to sleep, my body starts jerking. Do you do that? Sometimes your body jerks? Well, that happened. She stood up, got out of bed, and she looked at me and she says, get out of bed and go to the living room. We went to the living room. We never argued in bed again that I know of. Maybe a few times, maybe a little spiff here and there, but no more conflict resolution in bed. We got up. It was a bad time to be doing it anyway. It was in the middle of the night, and so it was early, it was late. That's not a good time, but it's not a good place either. So there's a couple things that the bed's used for, and you can figure out one of them sleep. Okay, so places that are not appropriate for resolution. In bed. Another place is in a restaurant. Not a good place to resolve conflict. Those people don't want to hear your junk. They don't want to hear all your dirty laundry. They don't want to hear all your junk. Not in a restaurant. That's not a good place to do it. Another place that's not good and appropriate for resolution is in front of company. In front of company, especially if it's family. Listen to me. Your sibling will probably take your side. Her sibling will probably take their side. You start triangulating company into this. You heard her. You heard him. Did you not hear what they said? We start triangulating them in. We want approval. Not in front of companies. Not a good place. The fourth one is when the kids are present. Don't conflict resolution. The kids are an interruption. They are no help to your conflict resolution. Kids cannot help you. And sometimes we even triangulate our kids into those conversations, trying to get a child on our side. Another place that's not appropriate for resolution is at work. Not a good place to try to conflict resolve. Right? So the last one, very important, during date night. Date night is not a time for conflict resolution. Date night is used for face-to-face time. You spend most of your time side by side with your spouse. You go to work. You go to church. You take care of the kids. You go see grandkids. You're doing life together side by side. Date night is face-to-face time. This is the time when you spend face-to-face with them and everything is about you and your mate. It's a time when you talk about your hopes, your dreams. Share things. Not a time to solve conflict. Not a good place. There's 3 methods of conflict resolution. We talked about one. The second one is to develop a non-attacking plan for communication. If you want things to go well in your conflict resolution, it is best that you find a non-attacking way to do it. Because I will tell you that if you go attack your mate in a conflict resolution, you will get a fight and you will get a war. And so that's not what you want. You want to find a non-attacking ways. And you've heard some of these. These are some of the ways that we communicate during conflict. 2 of these are attacking and 2 of them are non-attacking. So we're going to look at 2. You've heard this before. You say use the you statements. When you use the you statements, they become attacking. So you say things like you always or you never, or in that form, you're going to probably get some feedback when you start using that kind of language. Now there's another way to use this, which is the I statements. This is just tools. These are tools that you hear in every counseling setting. You can find this on the internet, but I just threw these in here because this is important, how we use our words in conflict resolution. You say things like, I feel, or I didn't think of that, or I understand it to be this. That's not attacking. That's just stating some facts that you feel are facts. They're actually thoughts, but you're stating what you feel and what you think. And so those 2, one's attacking, one's non-attacking. Here's another attacking method, and it's a non-verbal statement. We talked about that earlier. There's a lot of non-verbal statements. Now watch this. Here's the attacking. Rolling of the eyes, flailing the arms, loud sighs. These are attacking non-verbal statements. But there are those that are non-verbal statements that are non-attacking, which is calm. Focused eye contact. If your mate's talking to you, if you'll focus on them, focused eye contact. Sincere facial expressions. Calm hand movements. Some of us can't speak without our hands. If you've noticed that in these sessions, I use my hands a lot. But it's how you use your hands matters. Even if you're upset and you're in a conflict, you can communicate in a calm way with your hands. 3 methods of conflict resolution. We've talked about 2. Now we're going to talk about the third one, is negotiate for a resolution. Negotiate. You know, negotiation is whenever the 2 sit down together in a conflict, whoever has stated that conflict, usually the person who has the conflict, this has really upset you, and you bring that conflict to your mate, you probably have a want that you need in that. You probably have a resolution. You probably have something that you want to see out of this conflict, different. So here's the thing. You state your resolution. Now there may be some things that you might state that your spouse say, hey, listen, I can do part of that, but I can't do everything you're asking. I can't follow through with all that, so we got this part, so let me add this and let's work it together. So what's going to happen is you're going to negotiate. You're going to negotiate because just because it's your conflict don't mean you have the right answer. We may get the answer together, and that's usually what needs to happen is you need to get the answer together. Negotiating for resolution requires both individuals eventually agreeing on a result. Agreeing on a result. And some of you are probably thinking about some of the conflict you've had. It's like, there's no agreeing. I'm right, he's wrong. But there needs to be some, eventually you need to agree on it, whether the agreeing is common ground or you actually agree on solving it. Now here's the thing. If you find yourself in a conflict and you've been going at it for a little while and time's running out and it needs a little bit more attention, the resolution may be that we table it right here and we bring it back up tomorrow and take where we just leave off where we stopped and start it again. That is resolving it for that day. Everything's not going to be just cut and dry. There's going to be some conflict that's going to take a while. And so, but we need to eventually agree on it. You see, we talked earlier about this revolution of this, what we call the marital dance, and I didn't use that language a lot during that, but I knew it was coming up, but I want to use it now, that this little revolution that we talked about, this revolution of just conflict that just goes and keeps going and keeps going, like the Energizer Bunny, just gains power. It's called the marital dance. And everyone in this room has a marital dance, except for those that are not married. And we'll take care of that in September, and you guys will start your marital dance. And this marital dance, if you line people up in couples, they're going to look a lot alike. But every person has a distinct dance. I mean, and I don't know about anybody dancers in here. Nobody dances in the living room while nobody's watching. Okay, so if I'm not a dancer either. I've been told that I look like a one-legged spider dancing. So I don't try it. I just don't do it, because that's really kind of awkward to look like a one-legged spider. And so, but if you watch people, even on the dance floor, that everybody's doing, let's just say I don't even know what dances are out there. Let's just say they're doing a line dance. Okay? That's some kind of country dance, I think. But if they're doing this dance, they're doing the exact same movements, but if you'll notice, everybody looks a little different. And it's the same way in our marriages. They're kind of the same, but every marriage has a dance that looks a little bit different. And in a marital dance, there's 4 expressions, one being the goal. Because see, in this dance, what happens is that when we have a feeling, there's going to be a behavior. We talked about that in a previous session, that there's a feeling and there's a behavior. Well, every time that there's a behavior, what it does, it triggers the feelings of another person. And let's just say this: have you ever been to the doctor and you sit on the whatever they call that little thing you sit on for examinations or whatever, and they take that little hammer and they hit your knee and you have a knee jerk? Well, these little hammer hits are kind of like these behaviors in this marital dance, that when you have a feeling and you have a behavior behind it, whether it be crying, whether it be running out of the room, whether it be screaming back or whatever, what happens is it causes a knee-jerk reaction to the other person in this relationship that you're having the conflict with. And that knee-jerk reaction is due to a feeling because of your behavior. So when you display a behavior at me in this conflict, it causes a feeling, and that feeling causes another knee-jerk reaction, which causes a behavior. So this is where this marital dance happens. And every one of us in this room know exactly when we're going into that dance. I promise you, almost every person in here, if you think about it, every time you get into a conflict, you're getting ready to take the first step into this dance that happens every time. And so here's the idea, is to stop the dance. Remember, we talked about escaping the situation. When you see that this dance is getting ready to happen, escape it instantly. Don't let it make that revolution. Well, there's 4 expressions that we see in these dances. And one of them, the first one being that one of the persons or both persons are aggressive. Most real dominant personalities are going to be aggressive. And the aggressive person, here's what it looks like. They're going to win at all cost. Whatever it takes, I'm going to win this battle. And somebody's going to lose. So it's going to be a win-lose situation. Unless it's 2 aggressive people. If you get 2 aggressive people, and it's going to be a lose-lose, because both of you are going to lose probably some body parts by the time you get done. So it's going to be a lose-lose. Now the second expression is going to be a passive. Passive. A passive person gives in. They're just not going to put up the battle. They're not going to fight. They're just going to give in. It's not worth it. I just can't handle the pressure. I'm going to give in. They just become very passive. The problem with that is you have a win-lose. Because you're going to have a person who's probably aggressive. And here's the bad part is if you get two passive people arguing. Well, first of all, they very, very seldom argue. Two passive people they just don't get anything done. Nobody can make a decision. There's no conflict resolution because there's, oh, no, it's okay. You just do what you want to do. No, let's do what you want to do. No, we'll do what you want to do. They're so passive that nothing gets done. And then we look at the third one, the passive-aggressive person. These people are scary. I'm afraid of passive-aggressive people because they look so sweet, so backward, until you push them so far and then they explode like a massive bundle of dynamite. And when they explode big. But here's what we're shooting for. Number 4, we're looking for couples to be assertive. Because when people are assertive, they still maintain their diversity, but they look for a resolution. Aggressive people look to win. Passive people expect to lose. Passive-aggressive people have about had enough of it until they knock your head off. Assertive people say, how can we fix this? This is what we're looking for. We're looking to be assertive. We're not looking to be passive-aggressive. We're not looking to be passive or aggressive. We need to get something done. Assertive people work until it's done. Conflict resolution can be one of the toughest things that you're challenged with because it looks messy. It looks very messy. And when we get in this marital dance, we have to learn when we see this dance getting ready to happen that if we don't stop it and work towards a solution, that somebody's going to get hurt. And I'm not talking about physically all the time. I use that as a joke, but I'm talking about hurt emotionally. Our marriage is going to be in that category of the disasters because it's very negative. Stop the dance before it gets too far and start the process of conflict resolution. And think about the other person and communicate clearly. And when we're communicating clearly, the other person needs to stop talking, listen, and hear and understand. I don't have to agree with you. I just have to hear you. So when I hear and understand you, and then you can come back and say what you think, and I hear and understand you, then it's mutual understanding instead of misunderstanding.